Thank you, thank you. It's a thrill to be here. Thank you to Liveweek and NGO Expo for this invitation. I'm actually going to ask you to put on your seatbelts if you would, because I think this talk is going to be unlike any of the others yesterday or today, because the focus is so different. In the Expo, you'll hear amazing corporate and NGO contributions to health, education, livelihoods, and the like. My focus is not that piece, but it's on empowering citizens to act with their governments to be moving in the right direction. The US administration has proposed a 29% cut in the State Department, USAID, and a 31% cut to the Environmental Protection Agency. And we need to actually express who we are as NGOs and as corporations, but get a lot better at expressing who we are as citizens. I got a note recently, a few months ago, from Nick Kristof, New York Times columnist, and he said, what should people do if they want to support initiatives and policies that make a difference? And I said, well, the answer is to get face-to-face with your member of Congress, either in a kind of a protest mode, that's not my style, but I just want to bring it up, to stop bad things from happening. You'll see more of that in this coming week on healthcare in the US, or get face-to-face in a bipartisan relationship building, transformational mode, and that's what I'm going to talk about. The title of this talk for me is Are Silence and Shouting the Only Two Options? Bringing bipartisanship and transformation to citizen activism. And and I'm going to particularly look at what keeps us silent and what can we do to move past the silence. You heard this quote a moment ago, I'm going to repeat it. Frances Moore Lappé, who wrote Diet for a Small Planet more than 40 years ago, and she's now a democracy activist, has a book coming out next week called Daring Democracy. She said in a more recent book, our real problem is not a heating planet or rampant malnutrition. We only have one real problem, our own feelings of powerlessness to manifest the solutions right in front of our noses. And I'm thinking about the powerlessness of me to my member of Congress, or me to the media. I'm going to, I did a version of this talk earlier in the year at the Princeton Public Library, where I live in New Jersey. And I got an email from a friend saying, before the talk, saying, well, I just still don't know what to do. And I said the trick is to move away from feeling wildly ineffective on 10 issues or mildly ineffective on 3 to the point where you feel profoundly effective on 1. You can click away on the other 9, but you still feel profoundly effective on 1. The trick is, and this is a theme throughout this talk, is finding an organization that can dissolve the powerlessness, that can help you get to feeling profoundly effective. Let me just do my story really briefly. I'll do a brief version of it. How I got to where I am. I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in music. And I played percussion instruments in the Miami Philharmonic Orchestra in Florida for 12 years. And then 37 years ago, I founded the Anti-Poverty Lobby Results. And the shortened version of this story of how did you get from music to poverty lobby is I lost a dear friend at high school graduation. I learned that day in 1964 of his passing, and 4 years later, a college graduation in '68, Robert Kennedy was assassinated around those times. And these two kinds of events got me to asking the why questions. Why am I here? What am I here to do? What's my purpose? That's all I had was the questions, no more than that. And 9 years later, because I'm always saying I'm a little slow, in 1977, I went to a presentation on ending world hunger put on by the Hunger Project. And I went to this thing thinking, well, hunger's inevitable. What do I know? I'm a musician. I mean, it's inevitable because there are no solutions. Because if there were solutions, somebody would have done something. This is like ordinary citizen thinking. So I go to this thing and it's obvious right away. There's no mystery to growing food or clean water, basic health. I'm not hopeless about the perceived lack of solutions. I'm hopeless about human nature, people. We'll just never get around to doing the things that need doing. But there's one human nature I have some control over, my own, and my questions. Why am I here? What am I here to do? So I get involved in a big way. This is the end of the story. In 1978, 1979, I speak to 7,000 high school students on ending world hunger. And before I go into the first classroom, I read some statements from the US National Academy of Sciences Food and Nutrition Study calling for the political will to end hunger. So I asked 7,000 students, what's the name of your member of Congress? Anyone want to guess out of 7,000 the number that knew the name of their member of Congress? Do I have a guess?
20.
20. We have an optimist over there. No, actually, 200 knew, fewer than 3%, 6,800 did not know, just over 97%. And results, this group I founded, came out of this gap between the calls for the political will to end hunger on the one hand and the lack of basic information on who represented us in Washington on the other. And so now, just to give you a little glimpse, results started lobbying on child survival issues with the US Congress in 1984 and 1986. The volunteers generated 90 editorials in newspapers around the US on tripling the Child Survival Fund. This particular maternal and child health account has grown from 25 million a year in the early 80s to 715 million a year now. UNICEF reports that in the early 80s, 41,000 children around the world were dying every day from largely, people don't know this, from largely preventable malnutrition and disease, and now the latest report is 16,000 a day. The former deputy executive director of UNICEF, Kul Gautam, in a New York Times article in 2013 said, to a great extent, it was because of the receptivity created by results that the US funding for child survival increased so dramatically, and that led many other countries to come on board. I'm going to go to another quote of why are we so silent? What's our predicament? This is from Lawrence Lessig, a professor at Harvard who works at getting money out of politics. 2 years ago, Lessig said, we did a poll and found that 96% of Americans want money out of politics, but 91% said it can't be done. That's the politics of resignation. But the politics of resignation gives you a way forward. If we can find a way to thaw the resignation, we can find a way to winning. So that's the trick, finding organizations that are committed to thawing the resignation. And I'm going to give you an example of another one. A friend of mine, Marshall Saunders, a friend from Results, saw Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth 3 times in 10 days, 10 years ago. He went to Nashville to learn to do the slideshow. He went home to San Diego and he led it 43 times. And he realized early on that he was giving people 98% the problem and 2% what you could do about it. And he said people can't buy enough Priuses or change enough light bulbs to make up for what the government is or isn't doing. So he asked me to coach him in starting Citizens Climate Lobby. They turn 10 next month. And let me give you a flavor for what they do. They're a key player in having 23 House Republicans co-sponsor a resolution saying that climate change is real, it's partially man-made, and we need public and private solutions. They are the key players in enrolling 28 Republicans and 28 Democrats to join the House Climate Solutions Caucus. This is the bipartisan thing that I'm talking about. They had 380 chapters at the end of last year, up from 14 in 2010. They had 2,800 letters, op-eds, and editorials published last year. This is thawing the resignation. This is what it looks like. This is not how it's done. This is after it's done. They had 1,388 meetings with Congress or their staff last year, up from 106 in 2010 and the like, and you get the idea. Climate scientist Jim Hansen said, when they only had 46 chapters, now they have 400. Hansen said, if you want to join the fight to save the planet, to save creation for your grandchildren, there's no more effective step you could take than becoming an active member of Citizens Climate Lobby. I'm going to skip this one. One of the things that I hear a lot from a volunteer is, my member of Congress is so good, there's no reason to meet with him. Or, my member of Congress is so terrible, I mean, what's the point of meeting with them? And instead, you really need to follow the champion scale, moving those who are opposed up to neutral, getting members who are neutral up to being supporters. A lot of groups who are activists stop there. No, moving supporters up to being advocates, and moving advocates in Congress up to being leaders, and moving leaders up to being champions. It's kind of another piece of the puzzle. 3 key elements. How powerful and inspiring is the structure of support? In other words, if volunteers, there are 25 in the room and 15 raise their hand and say, I'm in, I want to do this advocacy thing, the question is, in what? What did they just say I'll do, and what did they promise to the organization, and what did the organization promise to them? Is it powerful and inspiring, or is it tentative and kind of just informational? And even if the structure is strong, how powerful is the enrollment into the structure of support? Is it apologetic? And the last one, is there sufficient focus? Or do you flit from issue to issue to issue throughout the years and don't give volunteers a chance to sink their teeth in and feel confident and competent? So I'm going to close with this story and a drawing. The story is from a woman who was a volunteer in Richmond, Virginia. She's now on staff, but at this time she was a volunteer. Her member of Congress was Eric Cantor, Republican House Majority Leader. The newspaper she's going to be talking about, not by name, is the Richmond Times-Dispatch. She said, when I joined CCL, I was suffering from climate trauma. I would read Bill McKibben's book, Earth, and I would weep at home, and I would weep at work. Then she joins this group, and 18 months later, she's co-leading a workshop at their conference. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. And this is her comments on their national conference call the month later. She said, our director, Mark Reynolds, likes to say, we're betting the farm on relationships. Then he says, we need to build relationships with members of Congress and editorial writers. Most of us CCL volunteers have never done that before. What in the world does a relationship with a member of Congress look like? How do we connect with an editorial page editor? Some of us have found models for those relationships in other parts of our lives. Gary in Boston uses the work model for his relationship. My relationship model is different. I adore romantic relationships, so I use romance as my model. That first meeting with the editorial writer, it's like a blind date, only you've decided ahead of time you're going to marry this fellow. You're going to be sweet and interesting, but not too intense. If it doesn't work out with the editor, you're going to marry one of his friends at the newspaper. Who do you know that talks like this? Certainly not someone who's resigned or still suffering from climate trauma. The business editor, environment writer, city editor, someone at this paper will find you interesting and compelling. It's just a matter of being persistent until you find the right connection. I see the relationship with a member of Congress as an arranged marriage. If you live in her district, the member's aide has to meet with you. That's where our congressman's ledge director told us in January several years ago. Since then, we've met 9 times with the ledge director. We schedule 45-minute meetings with him. He keeps us well over an hour. He doesn't want us to leave. Why? Because a good arranged marriage starts out cold and heats up over time. That's different than a love match, which starts out hot and slowly cools down. I see the editorial page writer as a painter. His canvas is the editorial pages. His palette is filled with letters, op-eds, editorials. I'm his muse, model. Who here thinks that they're your editorial writer's muse, model, and assistant? I want him to fill his canvas with colors that I like, so I'll have my group send 3 to 5 letters whenever the opportunities arise. That's how you get 2,850 letters, op-eds, and editorials. The more colors I put on his palette, the better chance of having him pick 1 or 2 of my favorite colors. Here's the last section, this slide and the next. This is postdoc citizen empowerment. During our conference, I met with 20 congressional offices. I met with many folks whose view of the world was very different than mine. Going into their offices was hard. I had to let go of a lot of emotional baggage. I could no longer judge them or hold hostility in my heart towards them. I had to let go of my fear of climate change and my fear that they wouldn't listen to me. I had to center myself in love. Releasing fear and centering in love, this is sacred and profound work. Now remember, she started at climate trauma and ended up at sacred and profound. So these are some organizations that I work with that are committed to dissolving the powerlessness, to thawing the resignation. Citizens Climate Lobby you heard about, results you heard about, American Promise on overturning Citizens United, the Quaker Lobby, FCNL on reducing the Pentagon budget, and Generation 180 on accelerating a cultural shift on energy awareness and clean energy adoption. The trick is finding an organization that encourages you to move out of your comfort zone, out of your comfort zone, and over to where the magic happens. I'm going to close with this quote from George Bernard Shaw's Man and Superman. This is the true joy in life. The being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. The being a force of nature instead of selfish, feverish little clod of ailments and grievances, complaining that the world will not devote itself to making you happy. I am of the opinion my life belongs to the whole community, and it is my privilege to do for it whatever I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. Life is no brief candle to me. It is a sort of splendid torch which I got hold of for the moment, but I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to future generations. Thank you very much.